Welcome to JonGetsGames. With 22 votes in and winning by 1, today I'll be reviewing Port Royal. This is a push your luck game with high amounts of player interaction and light engine building. First I'll go over the rules, and then I'll jump into my review. Alright, so how do we play Port Royal? This is a push your luck game where we have a deck of cards, and that's pretty much it. Every single player is going to start with 3 money, which is just 3 cards face down. You're never allowed to look at the opposite side of these cards. Your turns are very simple in this game. You draw cards from the top of the deck until you either choose to stop or you bust. At that point, if you did not bust, you will be able to do stuff with the various card setups. I'm going to do several little examples to show all the different mechanical things that can happen in the game. So let's begin with busting. So the first card we draw, we have a red ship. Now you bust if you ever draw another ship of the same color as a ship that's already out. So if I draw the second card, we're fine because it's not a ship. And then we draw the third card and we bust. Because we have a red ship here and a red ship here, our turn is over. These cards go off to the discard pile and it's going to be the next person's turn. Let's try to have a slightly more successful turn this time. So we start drawing cards from the top. We've got a black ship, that's fine. We're doing good, we don't want any black ships. Oh, we got a yellow ship, that's okay. It's not black, so we're good. And let's draw one more card. And I think this player is now going to choose to stop and illustrate the several things that happened at this point in the game. The first thing is that the active player chooses one card from the available cards in front of them, and they just get to evaluate it. So if they were to choose this yellow ship here, they would get 2 gold, which means they just take 2 cards from the top of the deck and they put them into their pile here. They could also take this black ship over here for 1 gold, but that doesn't really make sense because there are better options out here. We've also got this yellow trader, and if you were to buy this yellow trader, it would cost 5 gold, which I don't have. But if you had him already on a following turn and took a yellow ship, well, you would get an extra gold, so that's pretty good. But let's take a look at the sailor here. The sailor costs 3 gold, which we can afford, and they give you a sword. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I will show you. So these cards right here go into the discard. I'll show you what this sword gets to do for us. Now, the person to the left of the active player will get to choose cards from this display from what is left. It's going to go all the way around the table just once. And if they were to choose any of the cards out here, they would have to pay 1 gold to the active player for the privilege of taking cards on that person's turn. For instance, they could take this yellow ship right here, they would get 2 gold, but then they would have to give one of those 2 gold to me. That's something they'll likely do. However, no one else will probably take this black ship because they would get 1 gold and immediately give it to me, which is not very good. So once that has gone all the way around the table, we are going to discard all these cards and then go on to the next turn. So this sailor is now giving us 1 sword, and this lets us control some of the busting luck that goes through the game. So let's show how it works. We draw the top card, we've got a skiff, and we see 3 swords here. This means that I could discard this card before it hits the table if I had 3 sword power, which I don't. So let's keep going. Let's see, we got, a red trader. Oh, that's not very interesting. So we draw, okay, so now we have another green card, which normally means that we would bust. However, we have a 1 sword value here, which means if I only have one sword in front of me, I can repel the ship to the discard pile before it touches the table, and I'm able to continue on with my turn without busting. At this point, maybe I'd say, okay, I pushed my luck too much, and I would stop, perhaps taking 2 gold from the green ship here. We would go around the table, letting other people pick cards, we discard the rest, and then we go on to the next turn. Let's show what you get for really pushing in your luck this game. If we start to draw cards from the top, we see we got a red, and then a black, okay, and now we got a blue. So there are only 5 different color cards, color ships in the whole deck, and we have 3 of them out here, but this hasn't changed anything. Let's really push our luck here. Okay, we got a green. So now we have 4 out of the 5 colors, and because we've pushed our luck so far, the game is going to give us a little bonus. We get to draw 2 of these cards from the card row if we were to stop now, before it would go along to other people. So for instance, I could take these 2 and get 6 coins. But let's say we're really, really going for it. We really want to push our luck. And we draw 1 more card. Haha! I didn't plan that at all. And now we have all 5 colors out in front. At this point, you get a big bonus, and you get to draw 3 of the cards from the card row because you've shown 1 of each of the different colored chips. You'd probably take all of these for 8 gold, and you'd be laughing a long way because that is a very difficult thing to do. You would give the option to the rest of the players to draw cards from the row, discard the rest, and that would be the end of this turn. There are 2 different types of cards in the deck that don't actually go into the center row. The first kind is taxation, and there are 2 different taxation cards actually. Both of them will make everyone who has 12 or more gold immediately discard half of it rounded down, And this one right here will give everyone who has the least number of victory points 1 money, and this one right here will give everyone with the most swords 1 money. Then when these cards are evaluated, they immediately get discarded, and you keep drawing from the top of the deck. The other type of card in the deck that doesn't go out into the main trade row is expedition cards. Whenever these come out, they go off to the side and they get to hang out with all the other expeditions that haven't been completed yet, and you get to continue doing your turn, drawing cards from the top of the deck. Now, the way expeditions work is at any point on your turn, you could successfully go on an expedition if you have people in front of you that match the symbols on that expedition. So for instance, I just drew a captain here who has 1 anchor, and this jack of all trades can count as an anchor, a cross, or a settlement home, which are the 3 different types of icons on expedition cards. Now, if I was to, for say, have purchased these on previous turns and I have both of them in front of me, now what I could do is discard both of these, which means I'm going to lose these 2 victory points here, but then I get to take this expedition, put it in front of me. It's now worth 4 victory points, and I would get to take 2 money off the top of the deck for my efforts, and that's how the expeditions work. There are 2 different endgame conditions, and you're going to pick one or the other at the beginning of the game and stick with it. There is the standard one, and then there is an official variant in the rulebook. The standard endgame condition is once one person has 12 or more victory points, which is these shields, in front of them, then you make sure everyone has taken the same number of turns, and the person with the most victory points wins. The official variant is the same as before, where you need 12 victory points, but that person also must have completed at least 1 expedition in order to count as ending the game. At this point, the person with the most victory points and who has gone on at least 1 expedition is going to win the game. Before I jump into my review, I want to briefly go over the different roles that are available in the game. I've already talked about all these along the top in the rules. We've got a sailor with 1 sword for repelling ships. We've got 4 different icons for grabbing expeditions, and then we have traders in each color which get you gold bonuses for grabbing ships of that color. So now let's move on to these. We've got the pirate, which gives us 2 swords for repelling ships, although I want to mention some ships have a skull on the bottom, which means they are not repellable no matter how much sword power you have, but pirates are good at repelling non-skull ships. Then we have the jester. So if you have the jester in front of you and somebody else busts on their turn, you get a gold from the top of the bank. Also, if on somebody else's turn they stop and they offer cards to people, if all the cards are grabbed before it comes to you, you also get a gold from the bank. So that's definitely one way to alter other people's behavior. We've got the Mademoiselle next, who's just a 1 gold discount on purchasing future people, so that's great. And then the Admiral, who says whenever you go to grab a card and there are at least 5 out in front of you, whether this is your turn or somebody else's turn and there are still 5 there, then you get $2 from the bank, so that's great. And lastly, we have the Governor. The Governor gets you 0 victory points, but allows you to take an extra card from the card row every time you have an option to do so, so whether it's your turn or somebody else's. So a very powerful effect, which explains why you get 0 victory points for it. Alright, with that, let's jump into the review. For my review of Port Royal, I'm going to explain my thoughts on each item of this list as we work our way down. So let's start with the positives. The first thing that I really like about this game is how engaged you are on other players' turns, more so than your standard push your luck game. Usually in push your luck games, the only thing you have to do when it's not your turn is just egg people on and try and get them to roll the dice one more time or draw one more card so that they bust and we can all laugh at them. But in this game, you're very vested because they might reveal cards that you really need, and suddenly you find yourself begging people to stop, like don't draw another card, explain to them why it's a really good idea for them to not go, because in the back of your head you're thinking, I haven't seen that card in 3 turns, I really need that card for this and that reason, to make my expedition or something like that. And so you find yourself very emotionally invested in other people's turns, and if they bust, you're crying just as much as they are, which is a really cool thing. You don't see that very often. Also, it mitigates the kind of the randomness of when you bust, sometimes very unfairly. I've seen people on their first turn of the game draw just 2 red ships back to back. Boom, their turn's over. But fortunately, since there's stuff to do on other players' turns, you don't necessarily feel like you had bad luck and now you just sit there bored for 5 minutes. You have stuff to actively participate in before it's your turn again, and hopefully you have other people to laugh at or cry with. The second positive is I love the repel ships mechanism. You know, early game, you're very much at the whim of the cards, what comes out, and busting often and early. But as the game goes on, you're going to potentially be presented with options to get swords and potentially get several of them together, and you get much more confident about drawing deep into the deck, perhaps hunting for that specific card you want, or just maybe inexpensive card. You have a lot of gold and you say, I want something that costs 8 or 9 gold because I have that option right now. Or maybe you're hunting to get 4 different color ships, so you can be choosy, getting rid of the little ones, so you can pull lots of cards from the card row. Now, of course, there are still those skull ships out there that can still get you, but it's a very cool idea that you can make an engine that allows you to just get really confident and just push your luck really hard. Now, there aren't so many swords in the game that everyone's going to have 2 or 3 of these by the mid to late game, which I also like because it makes it an interesting decision because you're spending gold to grab those swords and you really want to make sure they pay off. And some people are just never going to have access to the swords, but they'll definitely have other options available to them. The first neutral point has to do with the endgame conditions, where you have the standard one, which just says first person to 12 points, ends the game, whoever has the most points wins. But then there's that variant, which forces you to have an expedition card in order to even have the possibility of winning the game. And I really think those should be swapped, because the variant is much better in my opinion. I counted it up, and 19% of the cards in the game are either icon cards for completing exhibitions or exhibitions themselves. And when we played without that variant, people just completely ignored them because you had to not take engine cards. You had to kind of slow things down to get those cards that don't really do that much for you in order to get an exhibition. And it was just like way too many turns for a small point increase and a couple gold with the expedition. It just made no sense to grab expeditions when you weren't forced to. People just kept doing engine cards where they get traders or they get discounts on other cards until they got up to that 12 points, and we kind of saw runaway leaders. Versus the variant, where you have to have an expedition, kind of slows things down and makes those cards actually worthwhile. You know, when 1/5 of the cards that show up are ignored, that feels wrong. But when you play with this variant, people are desperately trying to get those cards and have a versatile number of them, so when the correct expedition comes out, they can solve it. Or the vice versa, the expeditions come out and now they are really trying to hunt for those cards, and those jack of all trades cards are one of the most valuable ones in the game. When you play with the variant, it just felt much more tight, much more interesting having every single card in the game be something you potentially want. And so I just really think that those should have been swapped over, and you should have had a variant where you said you don't really need that to make the game slightly simpler, but I will only play with the variant. The second neutral point has to do with how hard it is to push your luck in order to get those 4 ships or 5 different colored ships to grab 2 or 3 cards from the card row instead of the standard 1. It just almost never happens, even if you have lots of swords. I've seen once or twice somebody go for the 2 grab with 4 different colored ships out. I've never seen that somebody get all 5 ships out, and I feel like that's a bit of a missed opportunity because it's a cool idea and mechanic woven into this game that as you push your luck, you're going to get access to more cards you want, but you could potentially grab more cards than other people can. And I kind of wish it was at 3 colors you can grab 2, and at 4 colors you can grab 3, so that it feels like that's a mechanic that actually shows itself off a little bit more instead of being something that I teach and then it almost never actually happens in the game. And now for the one negative, which has to do with the lack of incentivization of a player who's having a lackluster turn to not forcibly bust to stop other options for other players. So like if I'm drawing cards that I can't use or I don't want or I can't afford, but I can see that other people around me need them and can't afford them, many times I've seen people in this situation just keep drawing cards on autopilot until they forcibly bust and their turn is over. And I really don't like this because that person who's having that turn has a very uninteresting turn. They're forcibly busting, they're not going to do anything interesting. And everyone else around the table, they're not like in it. They're not like, oh, are they going to bust or are they not going to bust? It's kind of like, oh man, I really need that card and now I'm going to have no access to it. And he's just, okay, there he busts. Okay, now it's my turn. And it kind of screws with the flow and the vibe of the game, because usually the game is very like uproarious and everyone's just like on pins and needles. What's going to be the next card to come out? Are they going to go? And then you have these weird lame turns where just people just force bust and it's over. I don't know what would fix that. I don't want people to be handcuffed in so they have to stop so that other people have options. Maybe the first person pays a 1 gold penalty, the second person pays a 2 gold penalty, as people are getting options around the table to make that person who's having the lackluster turn know they're going to get more coins. I'm not sure what would fix it, but either way, every time it's happened, it's kind of been a bummer and a letdown. Now let's talk about replayability. In a nutshell, I feel like this game has quite a bit of replayability, even though it doesn't have that many different people that you can hire. When you really shuffle them all up together into their own little columns where these are just icons for exhibitions and these are all traders and these are all sailors, there's like 5 or 6 interesting character types that you can buy, which seems kind of low, but I don't think that's going to be a replayability problem because A, they all do pretty interesting stuff, and B, it has a lot to do with what other people have got, what other people have purchased in the game state to how you're going to play this game. Just because you have a jester this game and you had a jester last game does not mean you're going to play this game the same way you played last game. It's going to have to do with what do other people have. If the person to your left has an admiral, which gives them $2 if there's 5 cards in front of them, you are going to feel disincentivized for pushing your luck too far. You're going to want to stop before you give them the option to have 5 cards and get that gold. Or if there are lots of jesters out there, you might find yourself pushing your luck really far so you have lots of cards in front of you. So when you stop, you pull one, and every one of them will be presented with a card option so they don't get gold. The game state is going to be different every single game because different people and different orientations around the table are going to have these cards, and all of those are going to affect how you play each individual turn. Also, it's a push your luck game, so you have all this emotion involved in, ooh, do I draw another card? I don't know, is it worth it? Ah! You know, that is always fun in any push your luck game, in my opinion, so it gets a little bit of a free ride there. I imagine a very small subset of people might feel like this game gets dry after only a few plays, but that's not me, and I don't think that's most people. So now let's talk player count. This game plays 2 to 5 players. Now, I have not played 2-player yet, and I feel like it probably won't be amazing as a 2-player game. I'm sure it works, but the fun of this game has to do with what other people are really doing on their turns and how it interacts with you. So I found that 3-player worked okay, 4 was very good, and 5 was very good. I was kind of worried that 5 would be overly long with downtime between people, but I don't know, I've had a lot of fun with a 5-player game because everyone's so vested in what other people are doing. Even when it's this person's turn and you know there are going to be 4 people until it's you again, late game, that person might draw enough cards so that you still have an option to buy cards on that person's turn. And it's always also just fun to try and egg people on until they bust potentially. So I found that 4 is probably the best number. 5 works really well. And 3, I don't know, I'd play 3, but I'd probably play something else with 3. I think you want lots of people for this game just to get the camaraderie and the energy up because that's really where this game shines. In conclusion, I love this game. It's got push your luck, which is something I really like. It's got engine building. It has luck mitigation of pushing the ships away, which is just great when you have luck elements in a game. It's just the whole package, and people always seem to be having a lot of fun when they're playing this game. People are laughing, they're yelling, they're crying, because you're just really emotionally attached to your turn and other players' turns. I think it works really well together, and I also love how each game plays out differently based on what people have taken different cards. You know, when you're sitting there like, do I draw this card? You're not just thinking, is this card going to be good for me? Should I push my luck? No, you're thinking, do I want to give this card, the option of this card to everyone else? Maybe it's the card this person really needs. Or maybe you're thinking, I am going to draw this card to force enough cards in the card row so that those 2 people over there who are jesters are not going to get the coin value. Or maybe you don't draw it because this person right here has that admiral, which gives them $2 every time there's 5 cards in the tableau in front of them. So you have all these things coming together, and then you have people who are saying, do it, don't do it, don't do it, and it all comes together. Oh, it's a really good package where I've had a lot of fun playing this game. If you like press your luck games, you should definitely give this one a shot. If you're not into push your luck games, then maybe give it a shot. There are some ways to mitigate that luck, but bad luck can definitely still hit you. That being said, I've come back from behind to win this game. It's one of the best parts about push your luck games is that you're never quite out of it, and I've really enjoyed this one. I'm going to keep playing it. I recommend it.